one of the things my parents have always taught is, hey, if you feel lost, go learn from somebody. Who's somebody that's done it? And I didn't know anybody that had built a coaching or training organization, but I did know entrepreneurs. And so I just systematically started to reach out to people that had success in different industries. And I sat down and said, hey, what am I missing? What am I not seeing? And I did have one particular mentor. He set me straight, and that changed the trajectory.
Our guest today is Mitch Matthews. He's a success coach that helps high-achieving leaders and entrepreneurs dream bigger, think better, and do more of what they were put on the planet to do.
Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Rich Your Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Rich Your Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richyoursoul.com.
He's been around some very influential thinkers like Brendan Burchard, Michael Hyatt, and elite athletes and world-class entrepreneurs. He's a speaker and a coach, and he's worked with leaders from top organizations like Nike and Disney. He is also the creator of the Authority Bridge, a high-touch coaching experience that helps seasoned professionals build a coaching and speaking business that's aligned, strategic, and legacy-worthy. Let's meet Mitch and see how he's done it and what we can do. Welcome to Rich Your Soul, Mitch Matthews. It's great to have you join us today.
Rocky, it's an honor to be here. I'm excited to have this conversation.
And I'm excited to learn from you as well. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I love that you start with this because, boy, it's just so telling, right? I listened to a number of your other episodes. It's just fascinating to hear how that thread of what you understand about money and wealth and all of those things start at such a young age, whether it's good or bad and all of those things. So yeah, I grew up in a small town in the Midwest in Iowa, and my little town looked a lot like one of those towns you see in a Hallmark Christmas movie. We had the courthouse right smack dab in the middle of the town, and kind of the whole town just evolved and revolved around that courthouse. And for me, I grew up an extreme kid. I actually was a worried kid. I was sick a lot when I was young, but I would get interested in certain things, and boy, I would just lock into those. And my 12th year, the summer of my 12th year, I had fallen in love with bicycles. And 2 blocks off of that square, just 2 blocks away from the courthouse, was a little hole in the wall building. It was next to the Goodwill, and it was around the corner from the only strip club in town. So it was a great place to be for a 12-year-old. But that was Marty Schwinn's Cyclery, and it was a bike shop. And that summer, I was a latchkey kid, and I had the summer to myself. And so every day I rode up to the bike shop and spent as much time as I could at that bike shop. And I tried to do things so that Marty, the owner of Marty Schwinn Cyclery, would not have me arrested for loitering. So I would sweep the alley, I would paint trash cans, I would dust off bikes, I would move boxes, whatever it was. And at the end of that summer, Marty gave me a job. And so when I look back on my understanding of wealth and my understanding of money, a lot of it came from that experience because at 13, I had my first dream job. I was the only kid of my entire friend group that actually had a job. I loved that job. So I worked as much as Marty would allow me to, and we broke every law known to man. But I would have worked 60 hours a week if Marty would have let me. And I loved it. And all of a sudden, I went for, I have great parents. We had an amazing family, but we didn't grow up wealthy by any means. But all of a sudden, I had a bank account. I had money. And nobody really else of my friend group, especially, had that kind of experience, especially that it was mine. Like, it was my money. I'd made that money. And I learned a lot about kind of the good and the bad of that. But I did learn that there were certain things that came with having money, having funds, having cash flow that allowed me certain freedoms, that allowed me to make choices that a lot of my friends couldn't make. And I think because my parents were good parents and engaged parents, I tended to make good decisions on that front. But, all of a sudden I was able to take trips and I was able to buy my own clothes and wear whatever I wanted to wear and buy whatever bikes I wanted to and things like that. And so I realized with work and, if I was willing to pursue something I was excited about, something I actually was good at, I could earn money. And with that money came certain freedom. And so I learned a lot in a very short period of time. And I will say too, that the bike shop, what got me in the bike shop was a passion for bicycles. But what kept me there was I got bit by the entrepreneurial bug. And my passion went from bicycles to business building. And that changed my life as well.
When we were young,
yeah, right?
Like, you could get a job at a younger age. And while there were laws, nobody really cared.
Nope. And the bike shop, I was like, Marty was the owner. Everybody else there we were either in junior high or high school, and he gave us freedom. He actually probably gave me way too much credit. He gave me a lot of authority. I had a key to the bike shop at 13. I would close. I would work till 8 on Monday nights. That was our night for being open in town. And he just gave me responsibility. He held me as capable. And I think that really changed things as well. So I know now, looking back, probably, somebody would have been investigated, for child labor laws or whatever, but you couldn't, I was so happy and I was so engaged and I was learning so much. I'm so grateful for that season.
It's funny because when you are that kid and you have a pocket full of cash, it's good.
It's a game changer. Yeah. And it's one of those, my parents, my dad actually worked for the state. He was a warden of a local prison, and my mom was an accountant. So one of the other things we learned about money is you don't brag about it and you don't talk about it. So, my dad being a state employee, I remember every year they would issue in kind of the biggest newspaper in the state, the Des Moines Register, every year. They would issue a report that told everybody what you made, as a state employee. And I always remember that was the paper that we didn't get to see. My brother and I didn't get to see that because my parents didn't want us to see what my dad made. And that's fine. But they also were very clear. Hey, you're making money, but don't brag about that to your friends. It might allow you to do some things they can't do, or they might have to ask their parents for help on, but don't brag about that. They definitely reinforced I needed to stay humble, even though I felt this confidence and this freedom.
Were there lessons you learned more so? Because you would be talking to adults, right? That's who you're selling bicycles to.
Absolutely.
And so I know from having the paper route, it taught me a lot of lessons in sales and customer service and all those types of things. I've got to believe you must have learned a lot.
I learned about life by learning how to sell bicycles in Marty Schwinn Cyclery, because one of the things that would happen very early on, Rocky, as you can imagine, I was 13, for crying out loud. My voice was cracking, right? And the place was called Marty Schwinn Cyclery. We eventually wound up changing the name to Iowa Bike and Fitness, but it was Marty Schwinn Cyclery. So when people came into Marty Schwinn Cyclery, they wanted to talk to Marty. They didn't want to talk to a a 13-year-old with his voice cracking. And one of the things that early on, Marty made more money from repairs than he did from his retail sales. So, I would go out and greet a new customer. As you can imagine, people walk into Marty Schwinn Cyclery, the ding of the door, we had a little bell on the door, and people would walk in. I, as a 13-year-old, not knowing how to sell, would walk up to them saying, "Hi, can I help you?" As my voice cracks. And they would immediately say, "No, can I talk to Marty?" And, we did that for a few days. And then Marty pulled me aside and said, "Hey, this isn't going to work because I need to stay in back. I need to be working on bikes. That's where I make the most money." He's like, "We need to engage you." And he said, "What you need to do is you need to stop being or trying to be interesting. You need to get interested." And that is something I learned I use every day of my life, because what I was going out is I was trying to be as interesting as Marty, right? And that didn't work. And he said, "So here's what I want you to do. With the next customer that comes in, you're going to go out, you're going to greet them. They're going to tell you they want to talk with Marty. You're going to tell them that Marty's not available just yet. And then what you're going to do is you're going to engage them in questions. Do whatever you need to do to stay close." That was our mantra, stay close, and just start asking them questions. And I was like, I think I understand this. And so sure enough, next guy that comes in, "Hey, how can I help you?" Can I talk with Marty?" "He's not available right now. He can come out in a little bit. If you'd like to wait." "Sure, I'll wait." And then I took out a rag and I started to wipe off the counter. And I said, "Hey, I see the t-shirt you're wearing. Were you on that bike ride?" And he had a t-shirt from a bike ride. And he's like, "Yeah, I was on it." And I was like, "Oh, I was on that bike ride. Did you get chased by that dog on that last hill?" "Oh yeah, that dang dog," all these things. And we started talking, and I was like, "Hey, I know you want to talk with Marty. That's fine. But what kind of bike are you riding now?" And he started to tell me about his bike. And I said, "Well, what are you thinking about? Are you thinking about a new bike?" Because I noticed he was looking at bikes. He's like, "Well, yeah, I was thinking about this." "Oh, what kind of riding are you going to do?" And we started to talk about the kind of riding you wanted to do. Another ride was coming up. And I was like, I knew a little bit about that. And so we started to talk about that. And I was like, "Hey, I know you don't want to talk with Marty, and that's fine, but do you want to, we've got this great bike." I took it off the wall and I said, "Until we wait for Marty, do you want to take a look at this bike?" And I started to talk with him about the bike. And he's like, "It's a pretty good bike." And I was like, "I know we're waiting for Marty, but do you want to take a test ride?" And he's like, "Yeah, I want to take a test ride." So wound up taking the test ride. And then he came back on, "Do you need a water bottle for that? Are you going to need some new shorts for that ride?" Da, da, da. He wound up walking out with a $700 bike, never talked with Marty. And it was all because I was interested, not interesting. And from that day on, all I did was stay close and ask questions. And that changed my life. And it's something I use every day in my own business.
It's an amazing story. I would have probably looked him straight in the eye and said, "I'm Marty. How can I help you?"
Well, what was funny was Marty, in his brilliance, he had grown up in a similar way. There was a small bike shop in the town, or close to the town where he grew up in, and he had stalked the bike shop owner much like I had. So he'd started at an early age. So Marty was still in his mid-20s. That seemed prehistoric to me as a 13-year-old.
Yes.
But he was just in his mid-20s. But what he had done specifically was grown a big bushy beard. So everybody knew that he was the adult in the store. Everybody else was high school students and junior high students for me. So he was the one guy with the beard. So you couldn't miss Marty. But it was truly one of those things that, that policy, that approach, that mantra, that, as an introvert, I actually, in God's great sense of humor, I'm an introvert that, my day job is extroverted things. And I still, any networking meeting, I just spoke at a big conference in Phoenix, and I hearken back to that moving into the reception the night before. My inner introvert's like, "No, I don't need to meet a bunch of new people." But Marty said, "Hey, be interested, not interesting. You become the most interesting person in the room." Stepped right into that networking opportunity, met a bunch of new people. So I lean on what I learned on that bike shop floor every day.
He taught you agency.
100%. He certainly didn't call it that and didn't tell me that's what he was doing. He was one of those that taught swimming by throwing you in the pool. And boy, did he do that.
Hey, that's awesome. So you learn how to sell bikes.
Yep.
Straight uphill from there, right? You took over the world.
Well, what's amazing about that, I will say one of the other things that Marty did for me that changed my trajectory was I was not great at school. And like I'd said, I was a worrier. So I'd worried myself sick, had health problems, all those things, and missed school. So I didn't love the school experience. But at 14, Schwinn, which was the number one bicycle company at this time in the early 80s, had a selling school. And Marty decided to take me to the Schwinn selling school. And I didn't know what I was in for at 14. And I got into this workshop. And it was me and a bunch of middle-aged bike shop owners. They're all looking at what's the 14-year-old doing here, all this stuff. But this facilitator came in, and it was a classroom, not too unlike my junior high classroom. But all of a sudden, this guy came in and started teaching us sales. But he started to teach us in a Socratic method approach. We were engaged. We were talking. We were trying stuff. We were doing stuff immediately. And within 15 minutes of this guy watching him masterfully relay this information, I'm like, who is this person? What is he doing? I think I've found my calling. And literally at that point, I thought, I don't know what he just did, but someday I want to do that. And I will say that, in college, I wound up having my own seminar company, and I wound up selling seminars on sales while I was still in college. I would even hire my college friends and my college roommates and my then girlfriend, now wife's family, and my mother-in-law to be like practice customers to come in and all these kinds of things and help me to pay for college by doing these seminars. And that all started because Marty was crazy enough to take a 14-year-old to a Schwinn selling school.
I took my kids to things they were interested in that were adult-based things. So It is amazing what they will learn, what they will do, and what will happen from that.
Yep.
And so she went to Brendan Burchard.
Nice.
She went to Tony Robbins. She went to Seth Godin.
Game changer.
And had the ability to have conversations with them and the people in the room and to see the outcomes of like, these are the adults here and where are they off kilter? And like, so it really got them to be able to think like that.
Well, you gave her a new normal, right?
Yes.
Like she was probably surrounded mostly by her peers in school and those types of things. But all of a sudden you just elevated the floor. Yeah. Because now when she hears from Brendan, now when she hears from Tony, now when she hears from these leaders that are inspiring people and equipping people, all of a sudden that becomes the new normal. You can't reset that, right? My wife and I set a goal, and it's a weird goal, but we want to raise our kids to be weird in all the right ways, right? And it's paid dividends. I was in the pharmaceutical world for a number of years and business to business sales before that, but basically, as our boys were born and grew up, they've only known growing up in an entrepreneurial household. So they just knew, hey, if I want money for something, I need to go work for it to get it. And the sky's the limit on what's possible, all of those things. And so now they're both in careers that are very non-normal, but very fulfilling. And they're doing quite well with it. So I love that you did that for your daughter. That's a gift.
I think a lot of people say, oh, it's so hard for kids today. It's really not. I think the problem is the floor has been lowered so much for them that 100%. They no longer know how to do basic stuff. And that's the problem.
Yeah.
And if you know anything, it's not that hard.
Right. Well, and I think what's sad is, I think as parents, oftentimes in their best interest, what they thought would be their best interests, the focus shifted from growth to safety.
Mm-hmm.
And we've tried to keep our kids safe so they didn't have to go through a lot of the challenges that we went through, which in some ways, that sounds like a gift. But when we put our focus on safety, we really remove a lot of those opportunities to have the growth, to have that, like you said, it lowers the floor as opposed to raises that floor.
Very true. So you're in college, you start this company, you're doing all these wild things. Then what? Well, I thought, and I think, again, my parents taught us a lot of things and a lot of good things. But one of the things was to be humble
And I think early on, I realized that someday I wanted to have my own training company and do that full time. And I had a successful run of doing that alongside of being a full-time college student. But I'm like, you know what? I think I need to go and learn in other industries. I need to go learn from other people before people should really pay me a lot of money to do this kind of teaching thing on my own. So I decided, you know what? I'm going to go into business to business sales because I had a background in sales with the bike shop. But it's funny, Marty, the owner of the bike shop, as I moved into college, as I started to do more and more of these seminars myself and things like that, he's like, hey, don't keep selling bikes. Go sell rockets. I remember the first time he told me that. He's like, and I was a little heartbroken. Like, I loved selling bikes. I loved selling sunglasses. I loved selling all that stuff. He's like, don't keep selling bikes. Go sell rockets. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I still was in a small town in Iowa. He's like, listen, you need to go sell things you don't understand because you're put on the planet to do big things. And you right now could go sell rockets. Go sell rockets. And I really appreciate that wisdom. And so I went into business to business sales. And like you and I have talked about, it was very unglamorous, but it was the first door that really opened. And it was business to business office equipment selling. But I'm grateful for it because, man, it was a grind. It was hard, but it was good. And I worked for a company called Pitney Bowes, and I was selling mailing and shipping equipment. And so what was beautiful about an experience like that, I didn't realize it was beautiful at the time, but I look back and I'm wildly grateful for it, is I could have a morning meeting with the CEO of corporation. And then, in the morning, I could be having coffee with that CEO. And in the afternoon, I could be pitching somebody who was managing a shipping station in the back of a factory. And I needed to be able to speak to both of them. I needed to, still have authority, still make connection, still be concise, but also compelling, all those things. And that really taught me a lot about resilience and creativity and connecting and empathy and all of those things. So I did that for a few years and then got into the pharmaceutical world and really had great luck with that. I got in at a time when it was very entrepreneurial, got in with a company that was really growing and had a lot of success in sales. And then I got into the training department and wound up helping to lead a training department of a $2 billion pharmaceutical company. And then, as you know, I got promoted into a bad fit job, which was brutal at the time, but I'm wildly grateful because that bad fit job woke that dream back up of having my own company, of teaching and training and coaching and all of those things. And so that bad fit job, although it did its best to kill my soul, was the very thing that helped me to wake up to say, hey, I need to do my own thing. And so I started to do that on the side. And I thought it was going to take 5 years or so to be able to build a company that would allow me to replace my income and then some. And God's grace, a lot of sweat and some duct tape, we were able to hit that in about 5 months. And I've never looked back.
Wow, that was quick.
Yeah.
What do you think was the reason behind that quick success?
A number of things. One, I think I was in a position where I was desperate and passionate, and that helps. I jokingly say it, but this matters and you'll totally understand. But my wife also worked until we have 2 sons. And when she was pregnant with our first son, and she's a cancer survivor, so it's miraculous that we were able to have our own kids. And so while she was pregnant, we said, hey, whoever's making the most money, you can stay working. That person stays working and the other one is going to stay home, because we wanted to give that gift to our kids for at least a season. And I don't know whether I won or lost that, but I guess I won that race. I was making more. And so I continued working. But then we became, I jokingly say, but it's absolutely true, we became a sitcom life, which was single income, 2 children, oppressive mortgage. And so I even though I'd gotten promoted into this bad fit job, I couldn't quit that job. It's one of those that I would have loved to, I got the clarity on building a coaching and speaking business, a training organization. I got that clarity and I would have loved to quit day one. But because we were living the sitcom life, we were dependent on my income, and our kids are amazing and resilient, but they like to eat. and they appreciate a roof over their head. So, I mean, that's not selfish. It makes sense, right? So I was desperate to say, hey, I want this thing to happen and I want it to happen quickly, but I can't just take a blind leap of faith. I need to take steps of faith. And I made a lot of mistakes. I, tried a number of different things. I invested like a lot of people do. I invested in a coaching program that had a big name on it. And I assumed because this had this big name on it, that everybody would want to hire me. And it went the exact opposite. People would say, well, if you are this kind of coach, why don't I just hire this person that's big name on it and all of those things. And I wound up getting frustrated in a short amount of time. But one of the things my parents have always taught is, hey, if you feel lost, go learn from somebody. Who's somebody that's done it? And I didn't know anybody that had built a coaching or training organization, but I did know entrepreneurs. And so I just systematically started to reach out to people that had success in different industries. And I sat down and said, hey, what am I missing? What am I not seeing? And I did have one particular mentor. He set me straight, and that changed the trajectory. And I think it was a huge part of what helped us to launch faster.
What was it that he did to set you straight? Like, what was that? I don't need the specific words, but more so like, what was the concept that really...
Well, it was funny. He was a Socratic method guy, and I didn't realize the brilliance at the time, but I had reached out, and I'll just admit I lamented, right? I was like, I'm trying this. It's not working. I really need your help, all this kind of thing. And he said, hey, meet me at this coffee shop. And I met him at the coffee shop, and we got there, and almost instantly I'm, again, lamenting, I'm complaining, I'm bitching, I'm moaning, and all those things, right? Of how nothing's working for me. And I'm passionate about this idea, but nothing's clicking. No one's hiring me. And he stopped me and he said, what's your pathway? What's your sequence? And he asked me in a way where like he held me as capable, but I looked at him like he was speaking Latin. I'm like, what do you mean a sequence? And he said, every successful business has a sequence. What's your sequence? And I'm like, I still, like, you just used the word again. That's not helping me. Like, what are you talking about? He goes, this coffee shop. And it was a booming coffee shop, bustling coffee shop before even Starbucks existed, but it was booming. And he's like, this coffee shop has a sequence that's working. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he said, well, when you walked in, what did you do? And I said, well, I walked in, I got here before you. So I walked in, I looked at the menu. I walked up to the cash register. I ordered coffee. And he's like, then what? So then I waited over there for my coffee. And then what? And then I found a table, and then I sat here and waited for you. He goes, that's a sequence. What's your sequence with your business? And I started to think through like, well, I don't really know. I couldn't explain how I would onboard a client. I couldn't explain how, when somebody became aware of me, how would they move from knowledge to connection to trust to then investment? I couldn't explain that. And he's like, that's what's breaking. You need to understand your sequence. And what was beautiful was then, the ripple effect of that is then I started to become a student of sequence. And that's, I've been coaching and speaking since 2002. We've been helping other coaches and speakers since 2006. And we've been able to help thousands of coaches and speakers. And it's all about the sequence, as you well know. But that mentor woke me up to something and gave me a key that has unlocked countless doors.
This episode of Richer Soul is sponsored by the Profit Answer Man podcast. If you're a business owner who wants to scale and grow, increase profits, or want to have strategic conversations around your financials, then check out the podcast. You'll learn how to work less, increase cash flow, increase profits, and build reserves to help you weather storms. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform.
I use the word system.
Love it.
Versus sequence.
Yep.
I mean, they each have their place.
Yep.
At the beginning part of business, it really goes back to sales,
Yep.
right? How are you
100%.
catching interest? How are you taking the interest, warming it up, taking them through, getting them to know you, know, like, and trust you?
Yep.
And then does your offering actually solve a problem that they have? Have you figured out how to make that connection to say, I want this? Like, in that state, you walked in there, you already know what coffee is. You don't have to teach them what coffee is, right?
Right.
Some businesses, you have to teach them what coffee is.
Absolutely.
Or what it is that your business does.
Yep.
That was pretty simple because someone had already created that concept. And then how do you deliver and everything else? Honestly, when I started this business, I had the same, I'm a profit first guy, and we'll talk about that in a second. But that was the biggest thing. Like, how do you create that hook? Because there is a disconnect there. People don't want to talk about money, and business owners don't want to admit they don't know how to run the finances in their business that's got 7 figures of revenue.
Right.
And I just didn't realize they didn't even know how to run their business. They didn't understand the sequence of money in their own business.
Yep.
And so it's funny how all that, once I figured all that out and I actually got help, boom, like through the roof take off. And then sometimes I forget, I get a little lazy with the sequence, so I have to go back to it.
Right. Well, and that is a part of it, right? And what I love about whether it's sequence or systems, but there is a ripple to that sequence. And I know my mentor, he had to start with the simplest sequence so that I could get it and grasp it, and then we could go, more advanced from there. Because, to your point with that coffee shop, not only did I understand what coffee was, but I also was aware of this coffee shop. So he said, and then we iterated on that to be able to go, okay, well, how do you make people aware? How do you make people want to be aware? All of those things, right? And whatever your product, whatever your service is, as, if you're an entrepreneur, and I always say, hey, everybody's always selling. If you're an entrepreneur, you're selling. If you're a leader, you're selling. If you're an accountant, you're selling. You're selling somebody on process or getting things done in a way that, the systems that you want them to use. So everybody's selling. But yes, to be able to say, hey, what are the sequences that work, that attract, in our case, that attract ideal clients and repel bad fit clients? What are those things so that you can have the most impact, make the most income, and live the life that you want to live?
Yeah, you're very correct in that. And I think it's a lesson that a lot of business owners still don't get.
Right.
And it takes a while, especially on the marketing side, to understand just because people have a problem doesn't mean they want to solve it. And even if they want to solve it, it doesn't mean they're willing to pay to solve it. And so you have to really understand that value sequence. And a lot of times it's a little bit surprising what that is and how it works. And I just assume business owners wanted to make more money. Turns out that's not always the case. So,
well, it's interesting. It's like you understand it because you were in pharmaceuticals. There's always a presenting symptom, right? A patient always has a presenting symptom. We would talk about this all the time, that, a presenting symptom is the thing they feel comfortable talking to the receptionist when they call to schedule an appointment. The presenting symptom is the thing people feel comfortable about talking to the nurse when she comes in to do their vitals. But the real symptoms are what that person reserves for the doctor themselves, right? And so it's really interesting. And we dug into this even more so when I worked for a pharmaceutical company, and we actually had one of the first ED drugs that was supposed to hit the market. It didn't, because it wound up getting shut down by the FDA 2 weeks before we launched. But we wound up having all sorts of conversations about presenting symptoms versus real or actual symptoms. But I think that absolutely applies to entrepreneurs and leaders as well. Like, what are those things they feel comfortable saying are their problems? What are those things that are known? But then also, what are those things, those deep down fears, those deep down pain points they either don't want to acknowledge or verbalize in public settings, all those things, those are the things that often will be the things that tip them over into investing. If you can get to those real symptoms, those real pain points, and that's a process.
And I told you that's why we do profit first, because Mike has figured out how to get to that pain point and how to make talking about money in the business comfortable.
Yep, absolutely. He's made it okay to raise your hand and say, that's me.
Yes, he did.
He's an incredible communicator. I wound up having him on my podcast as well. Yeah, very, very good at that. Like, you guys have systems on this front locked up. It's beautiful.
And he's a good storyteller. So
yes, no doubt. One of the best.
He has been able to do that. But that's really not what the problem is. And so there's the underlying problem that we get to fix. So it's been fun with that. You actually use profit first in your business.
So so our accountant that we work with, who has had a huge impact on us, is a profit first guy. And it's had a significant impact on our business, just even from what I love about it is from a systems perspective, it first and foremost gives you a shared language, which then leads to a shared set of goals, which then leads to the systems, right? And so that has been wildly helpful. We knew that we were with the right accountant when we could start to have those kinds of conversations. And that those kinds of systems make all the difference.
It is. My wife's a CPA, so I live in that world too.
Yeah.
And we have conversations about how accountants don't know how to speak entrepreneur. They speak wonk, wonk, wonk. I'm like, what did you do? Well, we credited this, we debit that, and I did a journal entry. Okay. What about my cash in the bank?
Exactly. Speak English. That's exactly right. Yes.
And so that is something that we talk about. You've also got a podcast, Dream Bigger, Think Better, Do More.
And the podcast is called Dream, Think, Do. Yep.
Yeah. Dream. And so you do that because that's really what you help people do, correct? That's a big part of your work.
It is. So a part of our business is I do success coaching. I'm a keynote speaker. We have online training programs, and that's about half of what we do. Now about half of what we do is also training up coaches and speakers and helping them build their own training businesses. But yes, on the front end, Dream, Think, Do is the umbrella that sits over that success coaching and keynote speaking and training. And my hope is it's a catchy name, but it's also a 3-step sequence that's really helped a lot of people.
So here's the interesting thing. Just like business owners don't like to talk about profits, people don't like to talk about dreams, do they?
Right? It's interesting. Even the most successful people, and I just did a TED Talk on this, that I have a love-hate relationship with the word dream. It's in the name of my podcast, and it's been there for over 10 years. So I'm stuck with it. And I do believe in it. I mean, if you trace any story of innovation, any story of comeback, any story of breakthrough, there's usually at least one person that had a dream on their heart and they made it happen, right? So dreams matter. But you're exactly right. That word sometimes makes people cringe. But for a lot of people, it makes them lock up. And even for wildly successful people, like on my coaching side, the success coaching side, I'm expensive. So I only tend to work with really successful people. But that word dream can still lock people up because it's one of those things of, I have a lot of executives, a lot of entrepreneurs. They can tell me about the goals of their business. They can tell me about the markers they're shooting for, all of those things. But when we start to talk about dreams, many of them will say, hey, dreams, I know dreams matter. I know other people dream, but many can't necessarily name dreams of their own. And so part of my job is to help them make that easier. So, we don't try to make them live in a dream state. We don't try to say rainbows, butterflies, and little ponies all the time. You'll be running through a meadow and everything will be perfect. But to be able to say, hey, what do you put on the planet to do? Let's help you do more of that.
People really don't want to face that question. And I don't know why, but they really don't want to face that question.
It can be uncomfortable. 100%.
I'm not sure why, but okay.
It's interesting. A lot of people, even very successful people, a lot of people have reached a certain level of success. And I don't mean this dismissively, But a lot of people have reached a certain level of success because they continue to walk through doors that opened in front of them and they worked hard. That's very honorable. That's an amazing thing. It's a part of what's made our country great. At the same time, you see those people who are alive, those people who have done things they're incredibly proud of, people that have had impact and legacy. Often it's because they've also chosen to do something bigger, something different, something they had to create, something they had to choose. And it doesn't have to be a huge life change. It doesn't have to mean they burn their whole life down and move to Fiji, but it can mean making a choice. And part of that starts with saying, okay, what's important? And what are some of those dreams? What might they be?
And that's kind of the magic question right there. You kind of hit it, didn't you?
Right. I snuck it in there.
You snuck it in there.
Yeah.
What might some of those dreams be?
Yep.
Why does that disarm people?
It's amazing the power of might. I think oftentimes, and that's what my TED Talk is all about, is basically it's a plea to stop asking the "what's your big dream" question, because that question, which is usually asked with the best of intentions by parents, by managers, by friends, "what's your big dream?" That can lock people up because people will often wrestle with, do I have dreams? Are they big? Do they matter? Are they something that are going to be celebrated? And so oftentimes people are having all sorts of basically a wrestling match in their brain that doesn't need to happen. And what's beautiful about using a word like might, and this applies to the dream question, but it can also apply to mentoring and coaching in general, but just the injection of a little might opens up possibilities. So to be able to say, throw out the question, what's your big dream? And go with, hey, what might some of your dreams be? What that does is that allows possibility to walk in the room. It also, it allows people to explore without judging or prioritizing. And that's important because oftentimes when you ask the question, something like, what's your big dream? Then you start to ask multiple questions in one. What's my big dream? Do I have dreams? Is it big? Could it be celebrated? Should I do it? All of those things. Well, people get locked up before they even get started. So to inject that might allows for possibility to walk in the room. It allows them to actually start to have that conversation before they need to start making decisions.
And I think what it does, though, is it shifts the size of the dream. Because I think when you ask about it outside of that, everyone feels like if you're going to have a dream, it has to be to change the world, 1 million people, and to do something massive. And I think that's where we get too much. It could just be as simple as, I want to be a stay-at-home mom and take care of my kids. And that's okay.
Right?
There's nothing wrong with that dream. And yet we can't say it.
Right. Or we at least think we can't. Right. And it's that's where we start to get that wrestling match, that internal wrestling match where we have it like incongruence in our minds and we shut ourselves down. And that's what's sad is oftentimes that wrestling match happens at a subconscious level. And so people feel that tension. And because they feel that tension, they just immediately assume I don't have dreams. And to ask that, what might some of your dreams be? It really does allow people to say, okay, well, my dream might be to be a stay-at-home parent. It also might be to launch a podcast. It might be to take a trip. It might be to take a cooking class, whatever it might be, right? It allows them to say, all right, what are some of those things that it might be? And that is an important step.
And the other thing I find, because originally when I was doing my research, I was like, well, my question was going to be more so about, do most people reach their dreams? Because I was thinking, oh, you're going to have them give you a big dream. And the reality is most people aren't going to hit their big dreams because they're just outlandish. Mm. But then when I'm listening, I'm like, oh, a dream might be to go skydiving. Okay, that's a doable dream that people can do. It's not like this ridiculous thing that's going to take 20 years of slogging. Right. To get to. It's it's something you could do without that much effort. It's a leap in more ways than one.
Exactly. Literally and metaphorically.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But it's not unreasonable to do that. And so it is achievable.
Yep. Absolutely. And also, it's important to recognize that certain dreams are for a certain season. And just because you have a dream that isn't right for this certain season that you're in doesn't mean it's a bad dream. It's just not the right season. One of my favorite examples of this is we've always had dogs. We're a dog family, my wife and I. And I've always, for the last 30 years, I've always wanted to have an Akita. Now, we've had Huskies, we've had Labradors, we've had Australian Shepherds, but I've always wanted to have an Akita. And I don't know if you're familiar with this breed, but they're a beautiful dog. They look more like a horse in a dog costume than a dog, but they're just an absolutely incredible breed, super smart, but they're also wildly loyal. And one of the things it talks about is that if you're going to have an Akita, they recommend that you don't travel much because that Akita, it connects with its owner and feels like legitimate loss when you're not there. And there's been seasons of our business where I was on the road all the time. And I've always wanted an Akita, but in those seasons, that would have been a bad dream. Now, it wouldn't have been a bad dream in general. It was just a bad fit dream for the season so we were in. But during COVID, our business really shifted. So about 50% of our business and 50 to 60% of our revenue is now from online training. So I don't travel as much. I can't because we're building that part of the business. And so we wound up a couple of years ago, we wound up getting our Akita, and it's fantastic. And he's the perfect dog for this season of our life. It's a great dream that we've been able to achieve and we're still getting to experience. And I still travel a little bit, and he does get sad, but I'm gone for short bursts of time. And usually, and I'm not kidding you, Rocky, I often will find a bone in my suitcase because I'll pack my suitcase usually on on the floor of our bedroom. And he usually will come in and lay next to my luggage, knowing what's coming. And then he'll put a bone in there just to send it with me, all these kinds of things. Right. But it's like, that wasn't a bad fit. That wasn't a bad dream. It was just a bad fit for other seasons. And so to come into this season, it's the right fit for this season. So there are certain dreams that to be able to say, I want to travel the world, but maybe that's not for this season. Maybe you're not there financially. Maybe you're not there as far as where your family needs you, all those things. But hey, it's not bad to say, hey, that can be a great dream for a later season. How do I start preparing myself for that now?
Just make sure you don't wait too long.
Right.
Because then you may have a season where it's, again, no longer possible.
Yep.
That door closed. So you better make sure that you figure out when and how.
And this is, get back to your point, this is why these kinds of conversations are important to have on a regular basis. Because you're exactly right. It's one of those that I've found the people, and I have a book called Dream Job Redefined, and I did about 200 interviews with people that had achieved what they would call a dream job. Lots of different types of jobs. Some of them created them. Some of them found them, all of those things, right? But what's interesting about that is that I inventoried what were the commonalities, what were the common threads. And many of them had, on a regular basis, inventoried what are my dreams? What do I want to be doing now? What do I want to do in this next season? And it's amazing how often when you pay attention to those things, when you have the courage to inventory them, when you have the courage to talk with the important people in your life, whether it's friends or family members, about those things in a real tangible and tactical way, it is amazing how much more often those dreams are achieved and accomplished versus the people that never talk about it and then wind up regretting it down the road.
And nobody wants to end life and their eulogy with regrets, right?
Right,
So
exactly. And it's like, and to look at, when you look at science, I just had somebody on the podcast where we talked about basically deathbed understandings.
Mm-hmm.
And what's, as you well know, what's interesting in countless interviews with people on their deathbed, most people regret the list of things that people regret that's on the side of the things they didn't do is way longer than the things they did do. And so it's that thing of how do you eliminate as many regrets as possible?
Which kind of gets me on this next topic, which again, it's another one that I don't understand. People really struggle with permission.
Yeah.
And it's another one I don't get. I'm like, you need permission? I hereby give you permission. Go do it.
Right? Well, it's interesting because we live, especially in the United States, we live in a permission-based culture, right? And it's become even more so. And what I mean by that is, if you want to be in a sports team now, especially as a kid, you have to wait to be asked. You have to wait to sign up, right? I don't know about you, but I'm of an era where if we wanted to have a game, it was shirts and skins. You organized the kids in the neighborhood. You got enough kids to play, and you just did it. But now we live in a permission-based culture where, there's a lot of kids that have National Baseball League uniforms in their closet, but they've never put a game together themselves, all those things. Now, again, whether it's bad or good, I don't know, but it's the world we live in. But that's definitely played out in a number of ways. And so even more so now, we have to choose to give ourselves permission, especially when it comes to things like pursuing dreams, going after things that are maybe less common. It starts oftentimes with giving ourselves permission, not waiting until somebody grants us that job, but instead saying, you know what, I give myself permission to start doing little experiments to learn how I might do that job or learn how I might start that business. You don't have to burn down your life. You don't have to quit everything and risk everything. But we live in a time where we can learn almost anything we need to, but it starts with giving yourself permission to begin.
Do we have to give people permission? Like, can we just grant it? Like, hey, you have permission because...
Well, usually it comes down to more so giving yourself permission, right? Because most people are waiting for somebody else to give them permission to do things. But it's like my grandma Matthews, Grandma Jessie used to say, boy, people don't think about you as much as you think they do, right?
Right.
And so if you're waiting for somebody to give you permission, most people, even people that love you well, they're not paying that much attention. And so when it comes to things like this, you can't wait for somebody to see you. You need to begin, right? And it starts oftentimes not waiting for somebody else to grant you permission, but to say, you know what? I'm not going to wait for that. I'm giving myself permission. Seth Godin, you mentioned Seth Godin earlier. I love Seth. He says, don't wait to be picked. Pick yourself. And I think that is
when it's your turn.
Yep.
And it's always your turn.
Right? Exactly. So I love that. And I do think that especially, and this is true of high-level leaders, high achievers. Oftentimes people have achieved a high level of success in an industry, within an organization. They've done their best. They've brought their best, and they've done it consistently. God bless them in that, right? They played by the rules. Oftentimes, though, a lot of those doors open because there was a job opening and they went after that promotion. That's a beautiful thing. They had to work hard to get it. They had to prove themselves, all of those things, right? But when it comes to new endeavors, when it comes to trying something different, when it comes to experiencing life in a different way, it usually isn't going to be somebody else saying, hey, I give you permission to do that. It has to start with you saying, you know what? I think I want to try that. I'm giving myself permission to start.
That works. You're working on a new project yourself, the Authority Bridge. What is that all about?
So we've been helping other folks build coaching and speaking businesses since 2006, and we've been able to help thousands of coaches and speakers. I love it, and it's such an important thing, and I think it's probably more important now than ever. But in the last few years, there's really been a bridge between my coaching clients, where I work with executives and entrepreneurs and leaders, and that equipping of coaches and speakers, because I've found more and more high-level leaders, executives, successful entrepreneurs who are not wanting to quit everything or burn down their career or their business to go and start speaking and coaching. They just want to add it to the side. And one of the things that we've done is we've started something we call the Authority Bridge. And it is a process that we take these leaders and achievers and entrepreneurs through that helps them to add coaching and speaking to the side of what they do without burning things down, without starting from scratch. And it allows them to generate more revenue and have more impact, and oftentimes have more of a sense of legacy where they're adding value to the world and getting paid to do that.
That goes back to that word you used earlier. I called it a system. You called it a
Sequence.
sequence. They need a sequence.
They do need a sequence. And what's amazing, though, is oftentimes, especially for somebody that has been leading for a while, or they've had success, or they've been achieving, they have things that they know that would actually help the world. But oftentimes, if they're in an organization, they're in an industry, they might be a little insulated. And so what we do is we help them to build their authority in a way that doesn't disrupt their life, doesn't hurt their career. In many ways, it's actually helped people grow their authority within their organization, within their industry, but it also helps them to establish more authority outside that organization, outside that industry, and oftentimes be able to get to share that knowledge either through coaching, consulting, or speaking. And it really, for a lot of folks, it's injected some novelty. It's injected kind of renewed passion. It lights them up and allows them to, scratch an itch they've had for a long time. And again, without burning down their life and without starting from scratch.
And I would guess for a lot of them, it's been a while since anyone told them the truth. So
right, absolutely. A lot of leaders, it's a very interesting thing. That's one of the things they're nervous about, is to say, well, it seems like people listen to me within my own organization. Will they listen to me? Or more importantly, will they pay me to talk to them about a topic that's important to me? And that is a beautiful thing. We just had one of our coaching clients that's in the Authority Bridge process. He makes very good money. He does very well. He's an executive within an organization, but somebody just paid him $15,000 for a keynote at a conference that he wouldn't normally attend, to a group of people that he did not know, and he killed it, right? And for him, he walked away, and the $15,000 was wonderful. Like, he was very excited about that, but he was beaming, like he was on fire. Like, he felt a satisfaction at a new level because he was touching and helping people that were way outside his, previous network. And it also helped him to realize he's got some stuff the world needs. And it's just a beautiful thing to see those things line up. And there are ways to share, what you know in different ways. But I always say, you know what, you've worked hard for that. You deserve to be paid for that. Plus, people pay a lot more attention to something when they've also paid for it. So I always say, whether it's coaching, consulting, or speaking, you deserve to get paid for it, and you get to have more impact when you have been paid for it.
And I agree with you.
Yeah.
Funny how that is.
Isn't that crazy? I know. It's kind of an upside down understanding, but once you get it, you can't unsee it.
I agree with you. It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's one truth about success you wish more people understood?
That it's a lot closer than you might think, but you still need to define it. I love the question. What does success mean to you? What does success look like in this season? And what's interesting is a lot of people just spending a little time with that question will often realize, oh, maybe it's a lot simpler than maybe I thought. And oftentimes, if they're able to verbalize it, it tends to be a lot closer at hand. But most people don't have the courage or take the time to do it. And so success seems forever elusive. But if you take just a second to ask that question, what does success mean to you? And add even, what does success mean to you in this season? It's amazing what can flow from that.
Most people are 3 feet from gold, aren't they?
Exactly. So true.
What did you learn later in life that you wished you would have learned sooner?
To be curious.
I thought you were curious in that bike shop.
Well, what's interesting is what I was, I look back and go, oh, that was a byproduct of being, I would say, kind of having rabid interest and obsessive compulsive, maybe all those things, right? But with that, like I was excited about biking. I wanted to be a part of the bike shop, all those things. But what's interesting about curiosity is when you're curious, it's hard to be fearful. And I had a lot of my youth where I was afraid, where I was a worrier. And I think if I would have embraced curiosity more, I probably would have experienced a lot more joy as I was doing the things I was doing. Because it's almost impossible to feel two emotions, especially strong emotions at the same time. And neuroscience shows it's almost impossible to feel gratitude and fear at the same time. Almost impossible to feel curiosity, true curiosity and fear at the same time. One of my guests on my podcast said the opposite of fear is not bravery. The opposite of fear is curiosity.
Interesting. If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
I think I'd go back to Marty's advice to me on that bike shop floor. Don't focus on being interesting. Be interested, and you'll be the most interesting person in any room.
You know, one of the things that I tell young people, and they tend not to do it, but at your age, you have the ability to open doors that will close in the next season.
Mm-hmm.
So just go be interested in how people got to be where they are and ask them. And not only will they tell you a bunch of stuff, but one day they will open all the doors that you need.
Mm. Absolutely. I love it. So true.
If people would like to learn more about you, your programs, your podcasts, where do they find you?
Best place to start is mitchmatthews.com. That's where you can find out more about the podcast. We got a number of free resources. Plus, we were thinking about your audience, and I know you've got a bunch of rock stars and high achievers. And we actually just did some training called How to Find Time for Your Next Chapter. And it's for people like yourself that are, or like your audience that are wanting to do new things, but probably have a very full schedule, and to be able to say, hey, how do I do that? Especially if maybe they've been thinking like with the Authority Bridge, how do I have more impact? How do I drive more income? So that workshop is something we offer for $97, but people can go to mitchmatthews.com/time and enter the coupon code RicherSoul, and they'll get it for free.
Oh, cool.
And it's a really engaging workshop that helps people to not only think about how do you find time for that next chapter, how do you prepare for it? And, you know, if you're like we're talking about a leader, an entrepreneur, somebody that's got a lot of brilliance in you that wants to have more impact in the world, we give you some ways to do that too.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely, Rocky. You're amazing. And thanks so much for letting me be on the show.
I've always noticed that success is closer than you think, but you've got to define it. Most people are 3 feet from gold and they don't even know it. The sequence of how you do things matters more than the dream. It's like baking a cake. You have to follow the recipe to get it right. And the last is stop waiting for permission. I give you permission. Be curious. Go do something. Have fun. If you think Mitch can help you, reach out to him. If you know someone who needs to hear this, would you do me a favor? Would you share it with them? I appreciate that. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.